get grounded. We were passed out a new summary page. It doesn't have the date on it, so I would encourage everybody on the top, just put the new date so that you can remember which is which. I've totally lost track of all of my documents. Oh, is that on the bottom? Oh, in very small print?
I think you just took mine.
I must have gotten yours.
So just real quick, we're not going to get into details in terms of what's behind these numbers, but at this point, including what the school is going to present tonight, and what's been presented so far and others that we haven't seen, the mill rate is projected at 17.76. So it's gone down a little bit from before. We'll obviously, as we get into the discussion of the whole, we'll get back to this overall summary and get into some of the details behind it. But this just to help ground where the city budget sits at the moment based on what we've seen, and I'm sure there are other things that we haven't seen yet, and some of we'll hear tonight, certainly with local roads. So, any questions or comments before we turn it over to the school? If not, it's all you.
Is it gonna be that way all night, Theo? Just quiet?
Yes, at least for your presentation.
Okay.
Afterwards.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Amy Bowles, Superintendent of Schools. Carolyn Heller is here, our Finance Director, our two school board members that are part of our Finance Committee, and then several members of the leadership team are here this evening in case there are specific questions. So wanted to start tonight. Some of you have heard pieces of this, but for the general public, as there are questions coming in, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. First and foremost, some of the big things that we've been working on as a school department that have helped us formulate our budget, establishing a culture of trust and transparency between all stakeholders, which certainly includes taxpayers and city council, rebuilding educational excellence in a post-COVID world, which is quite different than it was prior to, community collaboration and working hard to start bringing more community partners into our schools and bring our schools out into the community, and finally using data to help drive decision-making. The budget process this year, I think, had three big components for us. The first being very collaborative. I feel like this budget was seen through many different lenses at many different times throughout the process. All members of leadership team went line by line through the entire budget, which I will never put them through in one straight day again. I will break it up for them because they were exhausted. But going through every single line, making sure we caught duplications, making sure everyone understood what was in everyone else's budget was important to us. Coming to the Finance Committee, both at the school board level and the city council level, to make sure that everyone was on the same page and that things weren't huge surprises for people. And then finally, throughout the process, we really looked at what grants do we currently have in place, how are we spending those grants, how might we change our grant funding spending in the future, and what other grants might there be available to us in the future to help offset some of these costs. So to just orient everyone a little bit to our student enrollment and student demographics, because I really think in looking at this, it's quite interesting. So everything that state funding is based on is October 1 counts. So for all data, you will see it's based on October 1, with the exception of two pieces of data that I will show you that are, I showed you October 1 and I showed you right now. So at Ellsworth Elementary School, 770, at EHS, 551, and at HCTC, 271, for 1592 enrollment for our school department. I found this fascinating, how diverse our student population is. Today, 20 American Indians, 12 Asians, 39 Black or African American, 48 Hispanic student, 5 Native Hawaiian or Pacific Island students, and 66 multi-race students. here's where some of the data I thought was important. You saw trend differences. So for people who don't know what all the letters are, SPED is your special education count. So we have 192, again, October 1, at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School, 62 at Ellsworth High School for a total of 254. 504 students that require case management at EEMS, 46, Ellsworth High School 90 for a total of 136. A big trend that we've seen that I have spoken to finance about is the trend of English language learners. So these are students that English is not their first language, and many of them, it's their third or fourth language. So when they come into the school, the services that they need is very high. On October 1st, we had 15 at our K-8 school. We now have 25. We had 2 at EHS. We now have 3 for a total of 28. Free and reduced students, K-8, 275, EHS 89 for a total of 364. And our McKinney-Vento population, which is alarmingly high right now, we had 16 at EEMS, that's your homeless population, now has 21, and a high majority of those 21 students are K-4. And then we have 12 at Ellsworth High School that are for a total of 33 kids. Something that I really want to show people and help people understand is the state is now being very public about per pupil expenditures. Anyone can go to the new dashboard that they've put out, look up any school system in the state, and see what is the per pupil cost average. So on the state report, the statewide average for K-12 students is $17,999 per student. And what I've given you is the per pupil average in Hancock County. So we right now are the lowest per pupil average in Hancock County, and we're below the state average as well. So I think that's important for people to know that we're not overinflating costs, that we really have tried to be fiscally responsible. Because as you look, I mean, we understand we're not going to have the Mount Desert Island amounts, okay? But I think it is important for you to see that our neighboring districts are higher than we are. So if you look at the sheets that I passed out to you, you'll see the top sheet is as presented for 24. This sheet is your approved budget at the school board meeting the other night. You will see that our grand total percentage has gone up from April 13th, and that's a direct result of our teacher contract being ratified. So we were able to come to 100% passage. I'm really excited that our teachers union all voted yes on the new teachers contract. I feel like the teachers and your board worked very hard to come to a competitive agreement that's competitive with surrounding districts, that made teachers feel valued and like they should stay in Ellsworth. But that change is now 100% reflected in our budget. So prior to, those figures were not all in. So you will see that change. The other change you will see on the bottom under revenues, after coming to the city council last time, you will notice that we increased the balance forward. Mr. Hamilton and other counselors talked a lot about thinking maybe we should increase the $500,000. Carolyn, Amy, and I talked about that and increased that to $750,000. And the other change you'll see is under CTE assessment. We had originally had 0 there. The CTE assessment, the way CTE funding works, it is different than the rest of your budget. So because we're a center, we receive CTE subsidy, which is your CTE allocation line. That CTE allocation line is what is considered to be funding for your career and technical school. So there is a difference between the budget expenses and the CTE allocation because we don't receive subsidy for all of the things that you receive in EPS.
CTE schools have a lot of things that are very different that the state currently is not funding under the CTE subsidy model. So there's always a bit of a difference. This year, the sending school superintendents agreed to pay an assessment to help offset the CTE budget. So for every student that RSU 25 sends to HCTC, they will be paying a per pupil cost for us. So that amount was agreed upon by the Hancock County superintendents and is now input in there, which also helps offset our budget and our effect on taxpayers. So those are the three biggest changes that you'll see. So for people at home that don't have the sheet in front of them, on April 13th, our grand total local appropriation was 18.34%. And with these changes, we are now at 16.95%. What I want to show you back on the slides, we did an analysis of fixed costs in our budget, just to kind of, I wanted to get a handle on what things do we really have control over and what we don't. So if you look at the percentages, my finance department did a breakdown. Salaries and benefits are 75.5% of our entire budget. Not super alarming, that's pretty normal for a school department. And then the rest are all the breakdowns of things that we consider to be fixed costs, per se, things you have to do. And then the variables is everything else. And that's pretty lean, in all honesty. That's down quite a bit. To have only 8%, so that would cover all your teacher supplies, all your curriculum materials for every subject, your library books, training for staff, professional development, travel, field trips. All of those things are what your variable costs are, and that has been cut considerably this year, which gets us to the total 100%. So I wanted you to see that only 8.8% is what makes up the budget, and the rest is the things listed above. So I'm getting calls and questions about really particular positions, why things are in, why things aren't in. So I thought it was important to talk about why our budget has fluctuated a little bit. So first, negotiated agreements for sure. People got raises. It was a negotiation year for our specialist unit, for our administrative assistants, and for our teachers. So those raises are reflected. Rise of fixed costs that everybody else has. We have added an assistant superintendent's position to the budget. I want to make it clear that that is replacing the curriculum coordinator position. It's not an additional administrative position. In total, we've actually eliminated a district administrator. We have combined our director of facilities and transportation. He wanted me to jump up here. Thanks, Glenn. Currently, right now, we have a director of facilities and maintenance and a director of transportation. So we've decreased that by one, and we'll have one position. Right now, we have a curriculum coordinator position. We have eliminated that position and used that salary to create an assistant superintendent position. The benefits of doing that, that certification allows that person to do more. They can step in when I'm not around. They can do all of the things pretty much that I can do, so it will help separate the work a little bit more equitably in emergency circumstances, because it's the change of certification is what it is. So I wanted to make sure people knew that we weren't adding more administrators. Our hospitality business instructor at Hancock County Technical Center is a new addition into the HCTC budget. That position has been in Perkins federal funding for the last 3 years. It now has to come out. If it doesn't, we lose the whole program and the position. And as you know, that's one of our highest job needs in the area. Grade 8 classroom teacher is in the budget. Currently, they're the only grade level at EEMS that has 4 teachers. And the 7th grade class is one of the highest classes at EEMS. So we have the need for 5. And currently in grade 6, our behavior and our resource room kids are all in the same classroom, which is a no-no. So legally, we need to separate those and have a behavior room and a resource room, so those are separated out. And then finally, this year, we were able to acquire grant funding for an additional ELL support staff person. That funding goes away this summer. If the numbers stay as they are, which they continue to trend up, and we just had another one register yesterday, we are going to need that position to service those students because we'd be out of compliance with the staffing we have currently. So that position has been added to the budget. Requests for the FY24 budget that we are not meeting, meaning we did not put them into the budget, but we felt as an administrative team, these positions and things would help us move forward. An additional facilities custodial maintenance worker, gifted and talented teacher to be shared across the high school and middle school, grades 9 through 12 instructional coach. Currently, we have one for all of K-12 and HCTC. We had hoped to have one K-8 and one for secondary. We had hoped to reestablish preschool for 4-year-olds. That helps us with our state subsidy. Honestly, this one is a little in my gut, to not have pre-K at our school. So we don't have 2 pre-K teachers in our budget. 4.5 special education ed techs, those would be new positions, are not in. We had hoped to start a career and technical education exploratory program at Ellsworth High School for career exploration for 9th and 10th graders. That's out of the budget. A lot of the facilities items have been completely removed from the budget in hopes to look at acquiring those things and having those things happen in a different way. Co-curricular expansion, we're the only Class B high school that doesn't have paid assistant coaches. For our varsity programs, we have volunteers, and we've tried for 4 years to get that position and those positions into the budget, and we've taken those out again this year. And then supplies, equipments, and workshop. Teachers worked hard understanding where we were at budget-wise and worked really, really hard to take a lot of things out of the budget. And so the positions, we did eliminate several current positions from the budget. We may not have eliminated teaching positions, but I think it's important for people to understand that we have prioritized. And so the loss of the curriculum coordinator position, transitioning to assistant superintendent, transportation director morphing into one position. My special education department has not filled an administrative assistant position to help offset those costs. We spoke to a technology support staff personnel and let them know, that department, that they would not have a position moving forward. And food service, who currently has an additional position in a grant, we had hoped to move that into the local budget, and we made the decision that that was something that we'd have to wait on in lieu of some of our other needs. So for future planning, I talked a lot about at the last presentation, us wanting, as a school department, it being very important to us to start being planful and mindful moving forward. This year, as you know, I put a freeze on the school department budget in January, and I did that as a direct result of some of the emergencies we had in the school department and us having to use our local budget to offset them because we didn't have reserve accounts. So one of the things that's very important to the school board, myself and the finance department, is beginning to establish reserve accounts so that we are not in this position again, that I'm telling teachers they can't order things and they can't go to professional development because we're in such a tight freeze. So our proposal, as you saw from the warrant articles, we would like to have a $200,000 special education reserve, a $100,000 student transportation, $200,000 for capital projects, and then the HCTC reserve is separate because HCTC's budget is standalone, so that carry forward amount has to have its own reserve amount. So that's included in the list, but it's separate. So that we would ask for $100,000. Now, to explain why these amounts for each of these, just so you kind of understand some of the things we're dealing with right now. So 2 weeks ago, we found out a student had been on the wait list at Kids Peace, was accepted. $85,000 tuition bill, bam. If we don't have, or if we had reserve accounts, instead of tapping this year's local budget, we could have used our reserve account to help pay for that. Things like right now, we have a student who's transferring to us who's going to need a one-to-one medical nurse, who has high special education needs and has to have a nurse with this student at all times. That comes at a price tag of about $80,000 to $90,000. That is not in our current budget. We would look to use a reserve account for things like that, that come up that we just don't anticipate. Student transportation, one of the things that I've mentioned at one of our facilities meetings, long-term, we have to start figuring out our buses. We're going to have to start replenishing our buses, and we're having a lot of buses that are starting to cost us money in repair. So student transportation is a line that we propose. Capital projects, big example this year is our boiler at EEMS, $90,000. Again, we took it out of this year's budget. If we had had reserve, we could have utilized a reserve for that. And then HCTC, well, my sweet HCTC building is always a problem there. So we'd really like to have a minor capital reserve account so that when things happen at HCTC, we have funding so it doesn't offset the budget. So that is a total of $750,000 of reserve accounts. Oh, no, it's not. That's not good math. That's 600,000. Look at
You
me.
just meant that the balance forward would be.
Oh,
applied,
yes, thank you. And then the balance forward would be 750,000 in the budget sheet. That would leave us, we're hoping, with that 3 to 5% for undesignated fund balance for what's remaining at the end of this year for spending. So at this time, I do have slides on state subsidy. You'll glaze over. I would open it up for discussion and comments and questions at this time. I do want to reiterate the timeline. So with the vote on May 8th, it's really important to us that tonight we have good, honest feedback from you guys, because if we need to make changes to our budget, we have to do it this week so that you can vote on May 8th and we keep our timeline of the referendum on June 29th. So please ask questions, be honest, candid. We really need to know where we stand. We've worked a lot on this. I have met with the teachers union, and they understand that if we have to make changes to this budget moving forward, we are probably looking at positions. And we're at a place where if we have to have those conversations because of negotiated agreements and contracts, we have to have those conversations now. So I can't express enough the importance of questions, candid feedback, so that we can do the work that we need to do to stay on timeline.
Amy?
Yes.
Do you mind? Sorry. So the two pre-K teacher positions, that was the positions that you were going to work with, is it Downey's Community Partners?
Yes.
How, do you know about how much that was that you had to take out to?
Was it 110, I think? About 110. They were going to pay for the space, the supplies. They were going to do all of that, and in exchange, we were going to hire the teachers, because one of the biggest things that we're learning as we look at the early learning workforce shortage is early learning teachers don't get paid what elementary education teachers get paid, because they don't typically work in the school system, so they're not under a negotiated agreement. So one of the models that's coming up statewide is have school departments hire the pre-K teachers so they have access to the PD, the professional development, and they're in a negotiated agreement. And then the pre-K collaborative takes care of everything else. Yeah.
So the fact that we won't be funding those two pre-K teachers means there won't be pre-K next year? Is
The
that-
school department will not offer pre-K next year, correct? So all of our private facilities that currently offer it will. The hope would be that eventually we will get to a place where we offer it for 4-year-olds so that the transition to kindergarten is not as complicated as it is currently.
What is the state sharing, revenue sharing for that piece? I mean, does it cover all of it?
It's in the subsidy model, so it depends on, they're part of your total school count, student count. So, for example, last year, last time we had it, we had 14 kids. So you get subsidy for each of
Right.
those kids, plus the teacher salary, plus all of those pieces. Does it completely cover it? No. State subsidy doesn't completely cover anything. But it does contribute to the bottom line of what you get. I will say, I'm hoping that 1 or 2 city councilors, the school board did vote last month on a 12-month collaborative. We have a consultant that's going to come to Ellsworth who is going to meet with the school department. I'm hoping city council maybe will participate. And we're going to invite the Down East Community Partners, CDS, and we're going to look at the monster that is preschool and early learning to see if over the course of several months we can come up with action steps and kind of a strategic plan just for the 3 to 5-year-old population. And my guess would be that there will be lots of discussion about the lack of daycare and preschool in Ellsworth.
Just to follow, how many kids were you expecting with those 2 positions?
They thought 32. They thought they could.
32, 31.
Yeah, they thought they could put 16 in each classroom. Everywhere has wait lists. Everywhere has wait lists. So the thought would be that they'd be able to do 16 and 16.
It is a piece of that, with this program, it doesn't cost for the child to be there, as opposed to regular daycare. So
Correct.
A student, so there are kids that aren't accessing it because they can't afford.
Correct.
Potentially to
100%.
participate in the existing program.
Yes.
In terms of your fund balance, so I know there's all kind of state rules and laws about
Yeah.
that you're supposed to maintain that balance. Is that baked into your budget to generate that differential, or is it just a factor of at the end of the year what you haven't spent so you don't budget for that? That's just
No.
vacant positions or whatever.
Correct. Yeah. And this budget is tight. I have been very transparent with staff. We may be looking at a freeze again next year. I mean, this budget is lean. And so I've tried to be really open and honest with staff so that they understand that this future planning and trying to get us ahead is going to take a couple of years for us to get there. It's not going to be just the sheer snap of a finger and we're good. It's going to be a process.
Thanks
John.
for the presentation, by the way.
You're welcome.
Always incredibly informative. The per pupil expenses,
Yes.
having lower than average in the state and also the lowest in this area, how
Yeah.
is that viewed internally? Is that sort of like a triumph of efficiency, or is that due to a hobbling of budget?
I don't love it. To be honest, I don't love it. I feel like at times people think the school department budget is so out of control and it's so big, and I think we've had that reputation. And it frustrates me. I think people have worked really hard with what they have available to them. I'm proud that we've done what we've done with what we have, for sure. But no, I don't like that we're the lowest at all, to be honest with you. I think we have such potential to grow and change and do some really great things. The unmet requests, the pre-K, our facilities needs. there's some substantial things that we aren't doing, and that was telling to me today when I put that all together, of kind of where we are.
Just continuing that, how do you think it's viewed by prospective, maybe people who are looking to move to the area? Is that a public figure that people will rate schools against each other that way?
I don't think so. I don't think people moving to the area would think to look at this or find this. And this, honestly, the way they're showing this data now at the state level, is more transparent than it's ever been. But I don't think people know that it's out there. So I think that people look when they move to the area or think about what high school, if they have choice. I think they look at our programming, especially at the high school. I think they look at what courses we offer. I think they look at our VPA department. Our athletic teams have had great success. You know, it's those things that tie a community together every 15 minutes today. I mean, all of those pieces, I think, is what people look at more than this. I think this is more informative for us in our decision-making and understanding where we're at as a school department, as a department of the city, more than it is something that a prospective student would look at.
One of the things that's interesting is the tuition. That's going up $300,000, which is not insignificant in terms of the budget. And if I did the math right, it's roughly 20 students, 19 students coming to Ellsworth paying tuition.
Yes.
And as you said last time, the tuition rates are established in part in terms of state, right?
Yes.
That process.
Yeah, when I actually looked today, Jen Berry in our IT department ran a report for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 45. We have 25 towns that have chosen to tuition students to our school department. Now, at the high school level, what that does is it provides a really rich experience for our kids and for our staff. And that tuition revenue is definitely helping offset our budget this year, the fact that we're having an increase. The Bridge Academy program that we offer at Ellsworth High School in partnership with HCTC, you know, those kids go to HCTC for half a day and then they pay half tuition to go to Ellsworth High School the other half of the day to take the college program. So I think we do a good job balancing expenditures with bringing in tuition revenue as well. Casey?
I've just been, of course, we've been thinking about this all week, so I've been thinking about the school all week and thinking how challenging things have been over the last few years for teachers, for students, and this morning I was trying to look up some statistics, which I don't think anybody really needs the actual statistics about. How students have suffered over the last 3 years in terms of both, or in terms of academically, in terms of socially, and in terms of emotionally. It distresses me that we spend less per pupil than our neighboring towns. I think our students deserve, I think they deserve more than that. And I think that the budget that you've presented is, and I thought it was last time, the absolute bare minimum. I will vote for it. I wish it were not the bare minimum. I wish that we as a community realize the importance of this part of our budget and the importance of all these kids and what the teachers are trying to do for the kids. And they're with my kid more than I'm with my kid. There's not, I've said it before, but there's not a more important thing that's happening in this city. So I am distressed by this budget, but I will vote for this budget. You did make the change of the balance for increasing the amount to the balance forward, which was Counselor Hamilton's suggestion, but I don't agree with that. I think you should keep it the way it was before. I'm distressed that we're not prioritizing pre-K. I think that's really super important. But that said, I'll vote for this budget. If, I wouldn't vote for the budget if we were asking to cut positions, but this is kind of the bare minimum, and so be it. I hope there's not a spending freeze next year.
Yeah, and honestly, so people understand, the reason why the 2 pre-K positions are not in the budget was to preserve current positions.
Right.
And that is the only reason why.
I think it's a great idea that you're gonna do strategic planning with all these other groups too, though, so
Yeah.
next year you come back with a plan, and I think that really, it's a good
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
I really hope that we continue where we have started since you've come on board and talking about, and collaboratively talking about ways that we can work together to save money on both ends.
Yes.
Such as the school bus garage and some of those leases that you're talking about. And I hope that, that we can continue that throughout the next year. So the next budget cycle, we both will have, some better numbers in our budget, and working collaboratively and working like a city and not a school department city.
Yes.
We're all together. So the finance meetings and things that we've done, I think, have been fantastic in it. It's like you had said with the collaborative efforts, but seriously, I bet I understand this budget better than I have when I went through a lot of school budgets. You've done a great job.
Thank
Really
you.
Great job.
Appreciate it.
But I also, I get it with the pre-K, and I think it's great that you're gonna do a collaborative and more focused, but I feel bad for the 32 kids that aren't gonna have pre-K.
Yeah.
The reserve accounts.
Mhm.
Obviously, the city council doesn't have any kind of line item. It shouldn't, and it goes to the voters, and I think that's where ultimately the school budget should be
Mhm.
decided, because that's the process. But, so with the reserve accounts, when you establish those, once you create the accounts, are those restricted accounts, or are they unrestricted?
Restricted.
Those are restricted.
So once you establish, because that's been an area, this has been talked about for many years. And that was the plan in terms of budgets passing, and that was what was talked about, saying we're gonna establish that, and then they never did get created. And I think that's contributing in part to some of this issue in terms of not having, moving $2.5 million or $2 million every year and not establishing the reserves. If, for whatever reason, it was
Right.
done, it makes this year more difficult.
Yes.
I don't think Ellsworth is alone in terms of school systems and budgets, and I think it's a tough time, and we're gonna deal with the entire city budget. I do think that as a city, we have to, there's a balance in terms of costs and prioritization. And I think you've done a nice job in terms of prioritizing what's most important. How do we provide the best education in Ellsworth? And I think some of the changes you made accomplished that without, I would not have been in favor of cutting teacher positions. That's certainly not the direction we want to go. And certainly with the challenges that our young people have faced coming out of COVID and before COVID, you need a strong teacher workforce, and you need to continue to build on that. And cutting positions is a direction to move downhill.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you've done and the board in terms of looking at it. And certainly, I would not recommend any other changes to it. I think it certainly should be passed on to the voters. And I would encourage voters to understand the importance of our school systems to the community. And At the same time, it leaves us with other decisions that we have to make. As a city, we're just in a place where I don't think we can do everything that we would like to do. And there are a lot of important things, and we're going to have to do the same thing, prioritize and try to figure out how to get through this year with the least amount of impact on the citizens. And so thank you for going back and doing that work.
You're welcome.
And moving that forward. And the per pupil cost, that is not something that anybody should miss either, because that's the first time I've seen it in that. We've heard about it in different conversations, but it's never been presented to say, here it is in line with other schools. The statewide average, I think, that's really helpful too.
Yes.
Because when you look at that, I mean, I bet, given if the statewide average is at almost 18 and where we are, then we're probably pretty in the lower third of all
Yes.
schools.
The presentation that you gave us was so great, just as Dale was saying, and I wonder, because the next thing after we approve it will be,
Right.
of course, that it needs to get voted for. And I guess this is probably not for us to think about, but for you guys to think about, if there's a way to present what you presented, especially this PowerPoint to the
So
community.
I've kind of thought about in my head kind of a communications plan of how we would move forward between the vote on May 8th and June 29th. I think that we have to do a mailing of some sort to all citizens that have really clear, basic graphics so that people understand. I think having community forums, typically in the past, people have not come to them, but I don't think it hurts if people have questions to come ask and hear. I think we've got to do a push on the web, on Facebook, teachers home with newsletters. I think we're going to come up with some basic information that was included in here that we can push out to citizens so that people understand. It's going to take everybody communicating and talking about and answering questions in the same way, with the same philosophical beliefs about what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, and the hope would be that we can get this stabilized, and then we can start doing some of the future planning that we'd like to do to move our school system forward.
I think local media also would play a role.
Yes.
In publicizing the details of the budget and why they're there, and the comparison of what we spend for people with other towns. So we're hoping that the Ellsworth American and other media platforms will do
Yes.
some interview Amy and talk and do some good reporting on what our budget consists of.
Anybody else have questions? Steve, Jean, Tammy? You're quiet.
I would say the same thing I said before.
Let
You're
the voters-
professional. You say you need it. It looks like you done your homework, so I agree with you.
Okay. Steve, come on.
I know Steve wants to say something, but
I have more questions than answers. I guess I need some help understanding a couple of things. Back to that slide at 15,000 and change there.
Yep.
Per student, 15,712. Is that total cost, variable cost, fixed cost? What is that?
So that is your operating costs for your students. So your teacher salaries, your supplies, your curriculum, those costs, your operating costs. We have to send in financials, and so that's what they use to do this.
So what's not in that number?
Oh, transportation, facilities, things like that.
And what is the amount you get for tuition students?
So for
Or is that variable?
It's different every year, and it's based on what you send in for financials. And again, it only includes certain things. So I think we're over 10. We're over $10,000 at the high school, and we're close to 10 K-8.
So you're collecting $10,000, and that's set by the state.
Yes, they tell
But-
us what we have to
But your variable
charge.
cost is $15,000 per student. So the less money you take in tuition, the better off you are?
Yes and no.
Explain that, just,
Because, Steve, the more students you have in your school, the more subsidy you get too.
okay?
Okay, so the higher your enrollment is, they take every one of those students and you're receiving subsidy. And you're receiving different calculations throughout the subsidy report for each student. So for every tuition student you get, you're getting a tuition amount, but then you're also receiving state subsidy for that as well.
Okay.
It's like double.
We're actually getting 12,169 this year per
There we go, we've
pupil
gone
at the
up.
high school. Just under 9,500 per pupil at the
K-8.
EMS.
And you have no control over that,
Nope.
Correct.
correct? But I guess what I'm asking is,
The difference.
well, yeah, if you're taking in
Yeah.
your 12,000, and it's costing 15,712 in variable expenses.
It's the subsidy that helps offset it.
So how much of that is offset? Is it-
That I wouldn't know.
Is it covering that, or is it costing that?
I think it's over covering that. That would be my guess, Steve. Because you have to do enrollment, okay, so we get a certain percentage of subsidy for every student. Then if that student is a special education student, is free reduced, is ELL, gifted and talented, we get another subsidy amount for that. Then we get another subsidy amount for your number of teachers. Like, there's this big gigantic formula that goes into it.
So you're thinking this $300,000 increase is helping, but those numbers right there say it's hurting. But there's things there we can't see.
Correct. So this is how they calculate EPS, okay, which is the amount of subsidy we get. So just because they're tuition, we still get this as well. So you're getting two pots of money for that one tuition student. Yeah. But no,
Thank
the
you.
tuition rate never covers that cost.
But
We're getting closer,
in
though.
this- In this subsidy from the state, you're saying there's some benefits there that we're not seeing in your number.
Correct.
Okay.
If I may, the other piece of this pie, if you will, is if you think about our taking in $2 million of revenue for tuition students, if those students were to not attend, we still are heating the buildings. Most of the fixed costs are just that, fixed. And as you could see from that earlier slide, what was
Yep.
it, 92% are fixed costs.
Yeah.
So 91%. So if you don't bring in the kids, you actually lose money. Because you don't necessarily
heating.
reduce the number of teachers you need, you're on various grade levels, and you still have the buildings, and you still have the buses, and we're not transporting those tuition students.
That gets
generally
back to
speaking.
that number being a variable number.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big, just on that point, so if, let's say there are 30 students, it's a little bit higher than a ratio, but if 30 students required a teacher, the cost of that teacher would be the only new cost that would be taken on by the school, so you would have to add that, everything else is fixed, but those 30 students are gonna pay far more to cover that position, and then some, so it's one of those things that I think, it's, that's the weeds of this, of trying to, it's a great question around understanding it,
Yep.
because there can be a real misunderstanding of, and I think schools are funded so strangely, it's.
A lot of moving parts there that,
Yes.
and thank you.
You're welcome.
I think one other way to look at it also is that at the high school, there are many communities around us where they have choice of where they can send, where kids can go. And first of all, we have to accept all the students who want to come here, right? So it's not like we can choose to refuse them, but we want it to be attractive to families in the surrounding towns to send their kids here, because that's a measurement of how attractive our schools are to people considering moving here. And we would, you know, if we, the only way, the best way I think we could get fewer students, fewer tuition students, is by degrading the quality of our education and our extracurriculars. And then we would lose students within our town as well. So it's, I think we look at the number of tuition students and we see it rising. We think, okay, that's a good way to measure how well we're doing, our success.
Well,
Well
last thing,
said.
um,
Very well said.
since this is my last budget meeting, I just want to take the chance to say that I know we focus on the school from a financial perspective this time of year. And one of the things that I hope will happen, not just promoting in terms of the education around the actual budget, but once we get past this, is the education around the success of what is happening in the schools, the outcomes for our students, the number of students who are graduating college a year sooner because they go through this bridge program, and the amount of money they save, but also the academic progress. I mean, there's so many great things. That's the value that the school system has to this community, and it will become, the more and more successful we are, and the more integrated we are when we look at adult education, working collaboratively with community college, and really, it becomes an economic engine for the
Yes.
community. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's the base. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. And, you know, I personally just get tired of that divisive, of just going after and trying to pick apart little bits and pieces of what's happening in our school systems. I think what we need to do is get back to just talking more about what is happening, because there's just a lot of success.
For sure, I appreciate that, Dale. And I do think that's one of the biggest things, and should be our goal moving forward, is just that. I want students that graduate from Ellsworth High School to know and understand that they can live here, have a wonderful life, a wonderful career, and contribute to their community. And so we have to start showcasing our schools so that they understand that. Because right now, we need these kids to come back and work here and earn a wonderful living. And in order to do that, we have to talk about the successes we're having in our school system, for sure.
Final questions, comments?
From what I understand, it's been a new experience that some of the students that have come before the council in the last year, that's wonderful.
Yep.
Just wonderful.
Used to happen way back when I was at Ellsworth High School as assistant principal. We used to bring kids here a lot. And then, you know, things change, things happen. I think it's wonderful that you recognized our state championship teams and our skills students. And so, yes, I would like those kinds of things to happen more. And I have some ideas that I'll talk with City Manager Mosier about, things that we can do to keep City Council more abreast of things that are going on in the school department throughout the year, so it's not just at budget season.
I think it's good, if I may, I think it's really good to expose that, you know, the breath of fresh air that you brought, and that, you know, the students coming to a
Yeah.
council meeting and us seeing the students. I think that's really, really nice.
Wouldn't note they all bailed as soon as we recognized them.
Yeah.
I know, it's the same way at school board meetings. I told them I thought that was,
Not good
that
for
they
our
should
ego.
stay.
You're a good time.
John?
So you started by saying that really what you're looking for is some sense of acknowledgement from the council that we're looking at this budget the same way that you are, so we can stay on
Target.
target for the May 8th, passing along to the voters. I don't want to speak for the other counselors, but it seems like there is a lot of that, you know, up here at this table. Would that, does that feel like, you know, I don't want to talk about winning and losing in terms of the two of us, but for the school system itself, does that feel
Yes.
like a good compromise?
I think we have felt very supported I think even after the last city council meeting, the amount of messages I received from staff, not just teachers, but staff all over the system, and I think leadership team will concur. I think people felt like for the first time, we're going to be okay. Like, this isn't doom and gloom, and we're not, the council and the board is not doing this, and we're not going to have to watch people lose jobs. I think people felt very hopeful after the last council meeting. I really do, and so thank you for that. And I think that the school department staff will feel that again after tonight. I know that I might sleep tonight and not worry about going in tomorrow and worrying about who I'm going to tell might not have a job next year. So I appreciate that very much, so thank you.
I appreciate all the work you did, all the work the school board did, all the work teachers and staff and everybody have done. So I think you put together a good presentation. I could have voted tonight easily, but we can wait and do it on the 8th.
Thank you, Jean. All set?
When it gets quiet, run.
It's quiet. That means run.
I was going to say, I'm looking at Glenn going,
Now back to Glenn.
Now you're the grill.
See, notice I have my red pen in my hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, local roads.
Local roads. Lisa is here for local roads. That is her wheelhouse. I will
Thank you all.
let the school department exit and we can turn it over to Lisa.
Back to Big Binder.
Now I know why the students leave.
I know I said.
Role models. Role models.
Can you blame them for leaving?
Yeah, but that's- Can't get out of here fast enough.
Do we have a,
Public Works, is that what it is?
no, it's in the Capitol, but I don't,
There's nothing there, just a figure. She's gonna-
oh, gotcha.
Nothing in a book.
She's gonna
I
throw a
was
bunch of
confused,
stuff
but I'm
at
very
us.
disorganized over here
My
with
book
all my
is
people.
totally messed up.
Yeah,
Good intentions, it's got lost.
I think I said that at
Yeah.
the beginning, right?
I've got
What you
several of
have in
these at
front of you
home.
today is not going to be
Yeah,
what
no,
you'll
that's
have
a
in
weird-
front of you at the end.
No, yeah, more stuff.
Oh, Lord.
So, local roads, so in your book, just for everyone, there is no local roads breakdown. When we put this book together, local roads hadn't even met yet. We gave you a figure, once we had that figure of what they were hoping to achieve in this budget process. We've also discussed, Lisa and I have discussed and concur that listing out projects isn't necessarily productive because that sets an expectation that Road A is gonna be paved this year, and then for a whole host of reasons, as we go through the course of the year, price increases, lack of ability to get projects completed, having that expectation set then becomes problematic, and we get a lot of complaints, and people, well, why wasn't my road paved? It said it was gonna be paved, and so by putting a less specific project list in front of you, which is what Lisa has produced, I think will lend itself towards providing us flexibility with not necessarily being able to complete all the projects that we anticipate or would like to be able to complete over the course of the next budget cycle. So that's a little explanation as to why you don't have specific roads in front of you. The local roads committee has met twice.
Yep.
In preparation for this. A couple of the counselors here are on it. Without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Lisa, since this is.
So, a couple things, like Glenn was talking about, one of the reasons for the people at home and for counselors, when we at the local roads, committee put this list, our list together of projects, we are using prices from previous years. So I'm looking at what last year's price was for asphalt, doing estimates based on last year's prices, And as we know, it varies every year. Sometimes, well, more than likely, it's gonna go up, right? We also have something in our bid specs for asphalt called it's a liquid asphalt adjustment, essentially. So what it does is, it allows us to get bid prices at a certain time of year, and then if liquid asphalt prices go up, we potentially pay more, but if liquid asphalt prices go down, we potentially save more. So it fluctuates, but it allows a better bid process. The state of Maine does it. It allows a better bid process because the asphalt companies aren't artificially inflating their costs because they're not sure where the liquid asphalt prices are going to be in 6 months or a year, because sometimes we're paving in the spring when the bid was put out in the previous August. So by having that clause in our spec allows us to pay real, right now prices at the time of actual work being done. So with that, it is very hard to be completely specific about, like Glenn says, like, you know, say Red Bridge Road, that I'm gonna spend exactly $136,166 on it. That's not realistic. It's gonna be somewhere in that range, but it's not going to be the exact number. So that is why he's talking about, like, having the specific list is great. It gives us an idea of where we want to go and what we want to accomplish. But 9 times out of 10, 1 or 2 of those streets don't end up happening for a host of different reasons. Emergencies on Mill Dam Road or whatever else. So that's kind of the history of, you know, some of the reasons things don't happen the year we think they're gonna happen. We did in the, one of the things the local roads committee did discuss, and we put, significant time and money into this year, is the idea of spending money on engineering fees or costs. And the reason for that was, there was talk when we were, looking over our project list for the next 5 years, because we put together kind of a basic 5-year plan too. Cost of construction right now is actually really high. Materials, labor shortages, and contractors who are booked out already a year in advance. So the cost of construction is, in my opinion, kind of artificially high right now. The thought process was, why not take advantage of that and spend some money on engineering? Engineering costs last year, this year, next year are all going to be about the same. You know what I mean? It's kind of a normal, standardized cost of engineering is cost of engineering. So we take advantage of the fact that engineering costs are, you know, staying the same as they've been in the past, and we spend some money on engineering so that in a year or two, when hopefully construction costs are not artificially inflated, we have these things already previously engineered and we're ready to put them out to bid. So that's why we have, I think, 3 or 4 different types of engineering projects, or engineering costs in there. So, I mean, I'm willing, I think at least, I know 2 or 3 of you at least had this list. I mean, we can talk about what's on here. I don't know what you have, honestly, so.
Well, I just have a page that's in the Capitol that says local roads, local roads, local roads, local roads, local roads, local roads. 1 million.
It looks like Glenn's going to maybe make some copies of
Glenn would
things,
too.
so, because I do think, I think
Okay.
it's important that we have a list of at least the projects that
What
we're.
this is, yep.
That's what he.
So, I mean, while he's making it, I can do a quick rundown.
But can I
Yep,
just ask a quick question about what you said? So,
yep.
do you mean that in normal times, if stuff didn't cost so much, you would engineer, then build, engineer, then build, engineer, then build, and you're saying focus more on engineer, 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 engineer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not building anything. Please don't go there, because there are plenty of things that need to be built. But I'm saying, you know, this is a big number, and it's a bigger number than we've asked for even in the last couple of years. But we all know the roads are falling apart, and we have a lot of needs. And a lot of the roads that have these needs are ones that are not just what I'm going to call quick and easy fixes, right? It's not just mill it and repave it. It's going to need sewer, new water, new storm drain, new sidewalk, granite curbing. There's more to it than just quick paint it black is what we call it, asphalt paving, right? So the idea is because engineering costs are stabilized, right? We take advantage of that. We put some money towards engineering, and then when hopefully the cost of construction starts coming back to normal, we're prepared and ready to go. On top of that is also as grants become available. If we're engineering is done, we can jump on it, shovel ready. That's a big thing. Shovel ready. Are you shovel ready? Are you shovel ready? We'll be shovel ready. So there's multiple reasons, but the biggest was the why spend all this extra money to construct things in an artificially high material time.
All the stuff we've talked about drainage issues that we're dealing with throughout the
Yep.
city, all of that gets budgeted through the local roads?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I
Yes.
just wanted to understand that.
Yep, so, we got, we have some grant money which we're using right now to do that. We're like assessing our system and, mapping our system, and we're doing that with grant funds. So that we can then go into the engineering portion of fixing our drainage concerns, yep. But that would come out of essentially local roads or grant type funding, yep.
And am I remembering correctly that ARPA funds can be used for drainage stuff? Or that's not right, I'm not remembering that right.
I believe ARPA can be used for water and sewer, but
Water
I'm
and
not
sewer, but
sure about
don't know.
stormwater.
Yeah, okay.
Was the, just, I think it's the case, but the roads committee, was that everybody on board with it? The committee kind of approved this
Yep.
plan?
I think so. We put together this list and we had a meeting and that's what we decided to put forward.
I assumed that was the case,
Yep.
I just,
And what you have is what we have?
I believe so. 2 red bridges, a Gary Moore, a grant,
Yeah, it's the same.
Heptown Water. Yep, it looks the same to me. Yep.
Thank you.
So is there any downside other than the roads don't get done until construction costs come down? Is it, do they become dangerous past a certain level? Do they become more expensive later because we're only doing engineering costs and not fixing them for an extra year or so?
The ones that need engineering are to the point where it's not gonna make a huge difference a year or two. Honestly. But the ones that you do see on here that are up for what I call construction this year are ones or areas that are to the point where we absolutely need to do something now. They're not major engineering costs. It's pulling the pavement and repaving it, or reclaiming, or overlaying, or stuff that we can do without that additional engineering fees.
Lisa,
Councilman.
Lisa, does this include the additional monies that you needed for, is it Christian Ridge? I only see 100,000 on there.
So the Christian Ridge that's noted on here is for the construction phase inspection. The Christian Ridge Road, we believe that there's enough left over from local roads funds from the past couple of years to fully pay for the RF Jordan contract.
Sweet. Unless we.
We're
our fingers
waiting
crossed.
at the moment. Yes, but I believe, looking back at where we stood a few years ago and doing my math that I know of, it's close.
Okay.
Which math is that?
What I budgeted and what I spent.
The one that I tried to do with my kids, and it's like, forget this.
Oh, somewhat basic accounting, probably more basic than Munis system, but
Councilor O'Hara.
You already knew, huh?
No, you started to talk.
Oh.
I could sense it.
I just, for the public record, could we just talk about the cost of doing roads, like round numbers, it was $1.5 million to do the little section of Christian Ridge Road.
Right,
correct?
it's 3/4 of a mile, so it's not little,
Okay.
but,
But,
yeah, I mean, it sounds little, but the
it's-
adage, when I went to college, let's throw that out there, 20-some years ago, was $1 million a mile. So, if it was $1 million a mile for 20 years ago, it's probably about $1.5 million now. And that's full reconstruction, which is right around where Christian Ridge is coming out. You know, the cost to do preventative maintenance is obviously less than to fully reconstruct. And so we're trying to, and that was part of the local roads group's discussion too, is we're trying to get more on a preventative maintenance of the stuff that we've spent money on in the last 5 or so years to continue to keep that up so we don't let things get to the point where we have to totally reconstruct them all the time. That being said, a lot of the stuff around town that are the biggest complaints are DOT roads. They're not city-owned roads, they're main DOT roads, where the main DOT has responsibility for capital improvements. So they have responsibility for the capital improvements, but as everybody, the funding is not necessarily there. They can't fund everything that they need to do either, right? So I actually had a meeting a couple weeks ago now. Well, not a meeting. I was at a seminar, and Bruce Van Note, the DOT commissioner, was there, and he said that you know, federal dollars are up 30%. So DOT is getting 30% more from the federal government, but cost of construction's up 50%. So really, they're still down 20%. So, you know, DOT's attacking the major thoroughfares. You know, we're working with them now to redo Oak Street in the next few years, where they have High Street on their project list for '24. But it's the smaller DOT roads like Christian Ridge, State Street out here, Water Street, Surrey Road. It's some of those smaller DOT thoroughfares that are suffering because they're spending the money on the main corridors and they don't have as much for the smaller corridors. And what they're doing is they're looking to the towns to help supplement, and they're doing what they call a municipal partnership agreement, which is what we use for Christian Ridge. And it's essentially a 50-50 split. When we got Christian Ridge, it was up to $500,000. It is now going up to $750,000. So they're looking to the towns to help fill that gap.
so if we could go back to the Christian Ridge project just
Yep.
for a second. It's $1.5 million to build it.
Yep.
And roughly the engineering from beginning to end is how much?
So I'm asking for $100,000 for the construction inspection. I believe. Oh God. Oh, actually, hang on.
A rough number is all, is it $300,000?
I don't want to lie to you. I'm thinking it's usually 10% of the cost. So I think it's 120 maybe. But I might be lying to you.
All right, so 1.7 million buys your 3/4 of a mile of rebuilding a road. So you're asking in this for $2 million. And I guess my point is that we can't expect $2 million to go too far. It doesn't seem like a huge number.
Correct.
When everybody gets to use the road if they drive an automobile. Fair? It doesn't, to me, doesn't seem like a huge number when 1.7 million from begin to end, and I'm using round numbers here, assuming there's not many change orders, gets 3/4 of a rebuild.
Correct.
It seems like a reasonable number to me.
Yep. And part of the process that I wanted to do, and it's been a work in progress for the last 5 years, is to put a 5-year plan together. And I quickly threw one together just to get us started as a local roads committee, and looking at the next 5 years of the projects that we absolutely know we need to do. That's not anything that, you know, sometimes things happen and there's emergencies, right? I had for next year 2.7 million. The year after that, just the way it fell, it was 7.9 million. The year after that is just over 5 million, and then in year 5, it dropped back down to 2.5 million. And that's just looking at projects and saying, hey, this is about when I think, if it needs engineering, when I think we would be ready for it. Like Oak Street's on there, when's DOT gonna be ready to split the cost with us? And that's the reality of it, is we're looking at $2 to $5 to $7 to $8 million over the next 5 years, each year.
So with that said, I think this obviously what I'm about to say requires a lot of discussion and debate and looking into it. But I just wonder, at what point do we, as a city, consider some sort of bond for roads as opposed to trying to squeeze it into budgets? I mean, I just can't imagine a year where a council's gonna sit here and say, oh, let's give $5 million for local roads. That's just staggering. And at the same time, the infrastructure is crumbling. So we're not gonna do it, obviously, this year, but as part of the capital planning and consideration, I hope that the council, going forward, will put together a group that can really look at bonding. What does that mean? What would it cost? What would be the return? So that there's good information, and then make an informed decision about it. There's pros and cons of doing it, and that's why it really warrants that kind of look. But I think just based on what you're saying, that's, to me, that it might be a solution to really make some inroads in a way that's most affordable. But just throw that out there.
I could tell you that one of the most common complaints that I've got since I was elected to this council is about our roads. And it seems like now we've got to pay the bill at some point. And as long as we're not financing beyond the life expectancy of the rebuild, so be it.
I think that, when you say put a group together to do that, I think the finance committee would be the perfect group to do that. And, maybe once we get the budget done and we kind of settle back into normal routines, if that's something that we can talk about, reworking the agenda for the finance committee, that we take up certain things, like with the school department and local roads and some of these other issues that are coming up that we know need to be financed, and look at it, and the leases that the school department talked about, some things like that, to look at how we're financing things and see if there's a better way.
The 5-year plan that you sketched out, does that feel like that's the bare minimum to keep us from crumbling into the sea? Or that would be adequate so that people, if we did that and got to that point, people will stop complaining to us about the road?
This is mostly.
I was gonna say, they're still gonna complain.
We could pave, because you know what, we could pave every street in this city so it was flat and beautiful, and then you know what they do? They'd all complain about the speeding.
Yeah.
So, it's never gonna stop.
And the streetlights are.
Yeah, I mean, it takes care of a lot of the biggies, the ones that have kind of, the water streets, what it doesn't take care of is, and some of it is outside our control, right? So the city's only responsible for water / Bayside to Beachland Road. But if anybody drives Bayside Road from Beachland to Trenton, that's not ideal. But that is nothing that we're going to fund or do. That's completely state. So there's some education there as to whose responsibility some of the roads are. But to Glenn's point, the state's in the same predicament we are about, or probably worse with money, so it'll never fully go away.
No, I was wondering more like, how Amy basically was like, this is the bare bones so that we can survive. This isn't what we would really want. So I was trying to wonder, is this the bare bones or this is what we want?
This is pretty lean. I mean, it's only, this page, and there's maybe 20 projects.
Yeah, okay.
Over 5 years.
We have 96 miles of road,
Yeah.
so 20 projects, probably not all of them are even a mile, right?
No.
So
Yeah, it's
you're only
just
doing
kind of
a
bare
quarter of
bones
it, or
then.
a third, or
Yeah.
10th.
Is the limiting factor there the budget, or if you had more money, would you be limited by your crew in doing any more projects than are here?
So what I did is, somewhat limited by my time, honestly. I took last year, the local roads committee made a list of the roads that we all felt were the worst in the city. And I compiled that list, put them on here, figured out estimate cost, and that's what we're going with. So that was all of our feel good, fix these roads. That wasn't necessarily me going out and evaluating every single road.
So can you now tell me where the committee members live?
Not on these roads,
Just to see
actually.
how many of their roads got done.
So,
We're gonna need a map.
so realistically, what I'm hearing in the big picture is, realistically, you need $5 million a year.
Two to five. Yep.
I mean, when you started talking, and while we are making these decisions, the good roads are deteriorating.
Yeah, luckily, some of those costs are the highway department, right? Like, so, on top of the local roads, we are using the highway department to do some of that preventative maintenance. So there's some of it, not all of it, but that's a lot of what they do in the summer.
And that's Band-Aid work,
Yep,
correct?
yep. And we tried a new thing this past summer. I say new. It was new in the last couple of years. It's called overband crack treating. So you know, after you pave a road, 3 to 5 years later, you start getting cracks, minor cracks in it. And it's when you have those cracks, the water infiltrates into the cracks, gets underneath the pavement, and then freeze thaw, busts the pavement. Well, if you seal those cracks up before they expand, keeps the water out, saves the road. So, highway, we rented the equipment. You can rent that equipment. We rented it last year. Did Beachland Road. Beachland looked much better this year than it did last year. So it's small things like that. You know, I think it was maybe $15,000 for what we bought, but it's going to save that road for another probably 5 years. You know, additional to just letting it deteriorate. So it's mixing preventative maintenance and full construction and getting the best bang for our buck is really what we're trying to do.
Is this number in the
Yes.
summary sheet? So that's included. It's good to know. I was a little worried.
Thank you.
Yes, and
And then, thank you, Tony.
Just ruined my plan for Monday.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, so, questions, comments?
If
Got some work to do.
We meet,
I was like, I just need you to review the meeting plans
yeah,
again.
my scribble here. But so next Monday, the 1st,
Yep.
that is Monday, right? So, we meet, we'll have the library, and then we'll start our general discussion in terms of, you know, all the questions we have, different departments, asking for more information, comfort level, where we're at, suggestions, all of that. Then we'll convene again on May 4th, the Thursday, to continue that discussion. And from there, on Monday, May 8th, we have our special meeting, which will be for the school vote. And then we have on May 11th, the Green Ellsworth is presenting, and it will give us a final opportunity to review before our regular scheduled meeting on May 15th.
And if we do all that work, and it is so good, on May 15th, it is possible we could vote for the budget and be done.
No, because
No.
it's not on the agenda. We won't have the information to put out to the public for the public notice, right? Is that that's the limiting factor? Yeah.
Even if we,
What's the deadline for your public notice for that May meeting?
Next week, I mean, I could I can put it on the agenda, and worst case, it's tabled if the budget's not.
Does the public need to see the total amount that we'll be voting on?
Yeah, and there's different parts to it. It's not just one
I
big
think
vote.
realistically, shooting for June is probably.
Well, I mean, it's fine, it doesn't matter that much, but I was thinking, like, if all of our discussion is done on the 4th, and then the 8th is really to vote on the school budget, I mean, it's a little late for Green Ellsworth, but whatever. Then we would know by the 4th, unless you think we're gonna have much more discussion on the 11th, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, I think it gives us the time, voting, if we continue to do the work, whether we're done on the 4th or the 11th or even into the first part of June, voting on it in June is not an issue for us as far as, because it allows the city to then operate under the new budget. The only restraint was with the school.
Yeah.
So that, it doesn't matter.
So you're not worried
It's
about
not a
pushing
big
it up
deal,
against it.
as long as,
Okay.
you know, if we're still around this table, and I think kind of going to what the school board asked of us is, we need to be, we're not voting, but we should certainly have open, honest discussions that if we're not comfortable with where it is, we need to talk about that so that we can
Don't
try
wait.
to, yeah, don't wait until the actual vote. Let's try to work through it so that we can solve some of those and compromise and whatnot, so that hopefully by the time we get to June, you know, we're in a place where we feel comfortable. Now, that vote will be dependent ultimately on whether the school passes by the voters, and we could find ourselves having a special meeting to do a continuation budget, because it's all tied together. So if the school budget doesn't pass by the public, I know, just setting the stage.
I do think it's Ellsworth Green Plan's intention to have sort of a comprehensive input into the budget as a whole, so
Yeah.
it'd be helpful to hear
Yeah.
and maybe make some changes in the
Based on
coming
what they
month.
say. Yeah, that's a good point.
And just for the, I won't be here next Thursday, I have a work commitment. So I'll watch afterwards. Stay up all night.
At some point, in one of these entire picture conversations that we have, could maybe Larry explain, or someone more experienced than I explain, this FY 2024 total budget that was given to us, the mill rate from the projection to what it's estimated at has gone down, but the assessment has gone up again. And where is that assessment? Is that in new taxpayers, new tax base, or is that an adjustment of the existing, where does that come from?
I believe it's an adjustment of existing, but I will, but,
Yeah, it's an
yeah.
adjustment of 5%.
But we can
Okay.
certainly have Larry come back to.
Well, no, that explains it. So that's not extra taxpayers, that's extra valuation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Increase evaluation again.
Okay.
And we should have some increase, though. We've had some new development in the city.
Yeah, there's been some
Which is,
news,
like
so
you
some of
said,
that
it's
could
good,
be
we're selling
new.
it, but I'm not selling it.
He hasn't
Yeah,
read
right.
everything, I don't think processed yet, that is just his best estimate based
Yeah,
on.
I would like to know how much more that we do have in new development this year. That would be good to see a list, if possible.
Maybe he could come on the 4th, on that Thursday.
So at some point-
Because it would be helpful to get a sense, and the public needs to hear it too, because if property's going to be valued higher, and, you know, that's gonna drive some of what people pay, so.
So with the mill rate where it was showing now, what does that mean, like, for, say, an average $200,000?
Tammy?
Tammy didn't bring the.
Say the average,
Tony,
We don't wanna
where's my
hear it,
tanky?
but-
I know that a lot of people
No more
have,
excuses, Tammy.
Oh, sorry, I'm on it. There must be an app.
I know a lot of people have much more expensive homes,
Tony might be able to
but-
do it before
So
I
if
do.
if a $200,000 house had a 5% increase in value, it's now 210,000, and what is the number on here?
17.76.
0.01776.
I mean, it's gonna be a few
I gotta
hundred.
write it
It's
down
gonna be
too.
$3,729.
$412
$412
additional.
additional.
That's with the increase in the mill rate and the increase in valuation?
I just took the 200,000 and used what we had for the mill rate for this year, 1570, and used the mill rate for.
It just seems to me like everything's come to an accordion.
412 more.
You've been cheap all these years, and then boom, all of a sudden now, we're gonna pay extra. I mean, there's no way around it, I don't think.
I think we're in that tough part of the economy where valuations
Yeah.
are still, they didn't peak, and maybe they're peaking now, but the economy's also going in the other direction. Prices are going up, and
Right.
costs are going up, and the values are still up there, and until they swing back, we've reached that tipping
They're
point.
not
that
gonna
they're
swing
not-
back. I mean, companies are paying their people more than they ever did. They're not gonna be able to say, hey, you're gonna get a cut and pay because
Well, they're also
the
laying off.
cost of materials went down, you know? I mean, it's not gonna happen.
He also has to stay within a range. The state of Maine determines where you are and the percentage of the true, what the state values the city at,
Yeah.
and what he values the city at. He has to stay within a certain range too, so sometimes he's forced to increase it because we're too low.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to stay within 75%.
Year to year.
I mean,
And
that's,
if he falls
that's
below
fine.
that, then the state can order us to do a complete
Audit.
citywide reevaluation, which costs a lot of money.
That would probably cost
Huge
us
cost.
$2 million probably anyways.
Larry would have
So
so much
the
I don't think he's doing anything wrong.
On the 4th, we could try and get him in here.
Yeah, I
for-
will, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that might be helpful for
I
everyone.
just think this year it's inevitable. There's gonna be a race.
Here comes a spreadsheet.
I was gonna say, he's gonna bring a spreadsheet, and it's gonna have these little teeny tiny numbers.
So make sure you get
Bring
your
your
reader
reader
review.
Yeah, it's so.
Several years ago, they put $200,000 or $300,000 into roads. I mean.
How much?
200,000 or 300,000. 3 or 4 years in a row, they barely put any money into roads.
Right, because it was carrying forward. Is Lisa still here?
But there wasn't a lot going into them. But, so now it all gets jammed up.
Anything else?
No?
We could hang around for another couple of.
I do, well, I would just like to say, much like Amy's plea, I would put out the same plea, that, you know, we can certainly use some guidance and some direction. I mean, I've gone through this budget backwards and forwards and backwards again, and I've used my little red pen to cut every penny that I think can be squeezed out of it in order to try to continue to dwindle and chip away at it.
Do you have that list of the things that you've cut too?
Tony said she was gonna bring it
Oh,
Monday. so
okay.
that we
All right, I
could-
didn't know that
Because
part. I'm
I'm
sorry.
just a little, I can't give any advice because I'm a little confused at where we are because, well, we talked, we got new pages, and then you guys have made additional cuts. So I've tried to look through the budget and I don't know where we are. So you had talked about giving new pages so we had a complete budget. I mean, you don't have to do all of this again, but I would like to kind of know where I am, where you've made the cuts and where we had made questions and there were some wrong numbers and some things like that.
You mean like you want a front page for each of the departments, those pages?
Yeah, or just so we can make notes of, this is the change.
Yeah, we can go over the changes that, the most recent changes.
Yeah,
that-
but I mean, like, even the ones that we made while we were talking every budget meeting, we made changes, we found errors or things like that, and so I'm not positive where we are and all that.
Yeah, what I can do Monday is just put my computer into the screen and pull up because all of my documents have been updated with those errors during meetings and then the changes that.
That would be great, yeah.
And then if you want to make notes in your books, you know, when it's all done, I can get fresh copies.
As we sit here tonight, this is current, correct? Yeah.
And that includes the changes, and again, some of these changes that I made this most recent pass-through, the council may not agree with, so it's just things that I think for a host of reasons, some of which, you know, I'll be happy to explain, we can probably trim a little bit here and there. But we can definitely, myself, Tony, doing a lot of the yeoman's work, we can absolutely use guidance from you all as to what other additional areas you may identify as potential.
I definitely think there's some things in the capital budget that we could finance. Get some bonding for it, like, I think you and I were talking, was it $400,000 for the harbor dredge? So, I mean, those are things that we could kind of pick out and look at our whole debt service and try to determine if there's things that we could just borrow for.
As far as the meeting Monday, the only department that's coming back is the library.
So far, yeah.
So.
And Larry.
And do we need the library to come back to present, or do we just need the information in terms of what they want to submit? And the only reason I ask that is if they have a change, then provide it to you and to us, as opposed to sitting here and re-presenting. It just seems like we're carving them out, as opposed to just taking whatever. If they have a change, they have a change. Because our work is going to be more discussing the whole. So I just raised that as a question. Do we want to put the library through that?
I can reach out to Sarah. I don't know, since that last meeting we had with her, I don't know what changes she's made. We haven't seen anything yet, so.
I mean, we haven't seen anything. She mentioned it was just a couple of very small, like, less than a couple $1,000 type changes, so.
But we had asked her to show us a budget that included bringing back days of the week, full-time people, so I thought it was a pretty big.
I'm not.
And you were uncomfortable with like the way she had?
Yeah, she was going to do that, and she also, I think, wanted to talk about the library fund balance.
So there was sort of a lot.
I don't have
That's
fund
fine.
balance left.
That's why I raised it. She's
They
scheduled,
used-
so.
They used all their fund balance last year.
Do they have any this year?
Well, they may at the end of this year, but I
I think
mean,
that's what
as
she
of the
wanted.
beginning of this year, they wouldn't have had any because they used the last
All of it went towards this budget?
100,000 to offset the budget.
So the answer is yes, there's value in having her come in.
I think so, yeah.
There's a lot of community interest as well, and
Yeah,
it
I
might
think
take a
that's
little
true.
bit longer having
Yeah.
people speak again, but. you
So,
don't
to,
wanna
but to
ban
speak
them.
to your comments, Casey, I don't know that she did that. Because in my conversation with her, a lot of what she had to say, a lot of her feeling was, I've only been here for 3 months. I don't even know what I need yet. I don't even know what the library needs yet. I don't know where I want to go with the library programming. I don't know where where the shortcomings are, if there are shortcomings, as far as the budget goes. So there was some, and again, then this may have changed because I haven't had a conversation with her since that initial one, and since I'm sure she's worked with her board. But a lot of her sentiment was next year. I'm comfortable where we're at now with what I have now. And next year, she was very confident that she'd be able to come forward with a more aggressive plan that, that's, by then she'll have programming in mind, she'll have a better handle on what she needs for staffing and all of those types of questions, many of those questions you had. And she just she wasn't confident at the time that she had a really good grasp to be able to say, yeah, I think we need 3 additional staff or any of that, because she just hasn't been here long enough to be able to really form those opinions, but.
She did talk to us about working with her board to make a strategic plan for the next 2 or 3 years to figure out what it is the community wants from the library versus just sort of bull in a china shop, coming in and implementing things that may not work. So I think she just wanted to get her footing for a little longer.
So it will be interesting to see what additions she comes forward with.
We'll see her Monday.
That's all I have.
Green lights on, are we done?
Can I skip?
We're done.
We're done.